Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today at the Headspring Learning Exchange. I hope you've enjoyed the session so far. We've looked at some of the big shifts that are happening today. On the one hand, the future of work and how that's impacting both HR and learning and development. Thank you, Andrew Hill, for facilitating that conversation. We've also looked at the evolutionary leap that we're experiencing in technology and how that's creating opportunities for learning, how that's really changing the playbook. Thank you, Martin, for facilitating that conversation. And in this fireside chat, we want to explore some of the big opportunities we have and some of the key ingredients for making learning a platform for positive change, and what some of the key ingredients are for success in learning organizations. I have the great privilege to be joined by Peter Fisk today. Peter is a global thought leader, best-selling author, and he leads a future business accelerator. And we have the great pleasure of working a lot with Peter at Headspring, as he is one of our esteemed faculty members. Welcome, Peter. What a great pleasure to have you here and to discuss some of these big topics with you today.
Hi, Gustaf. It's fantastic to be here. What a great event.
Great. So how are you finding the world today, Peter?
Wow. How are we all finding the world today? I guess I find it difficult, confusing, but dare I say, I also find it quite incredible. So if you look around at sort of some of the ways in which kind of the world has moved forward during the last 9 months, you wouldn't quite believe it. You know, Apple became a $2 trillion business in just a few months compared to taking 25 years to create its first $1 trillion. So you can see a world which is changing incredibly fast. And I think one of the things about COVID-19 has it's accelerated that change. And so, you know, companies which we're familiar with, like Amazon or Tesla, but also, you know, some of the companies we're less familiar with, like Ping An or Pinduoduo in China, you know, have risen up to become some of the market leaders. And what's fascinating is how are they changing their approaches to how they achieve success and changing the approaches to how they work and learn inside their organizations too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a period of incredible change, and you know, I think as you point out, the change in approach in how you drive business forward, and actually the change in learning, and that's I think an area that is absolutely fascinating right now.
And I guess one of the things, you know, which is really important is that companies therefore don't just try to recover when we come out of this crisis.
Absolutely.
Because the world's changed. We've
yeah.
kind of moved forwards in many different ways, be it in terms of people, you know, moving to a digital lifestyle where they're learning, working and living digitally, or a new generation of companies rapidly emerging. And, you know, we really need to kind of not just recover, but reimagine how we do business. We need to kind of reset our compasses, if you like, and to take a new perspective in terms of how we're going to overcome some of these big challenges, be they financial, environmental, social, and how we can kind of, you know, really make sure businesses move forwards in new and better ways.
Yeah. No, I mean, we have big challenges, critical challenges to solve, and as you point out, with the incredible speed that we're moving right now, it's key to put in place a new MO, if you will, for how we operate.
Yeah.
And I think one of the points that I found really fascinating is the work around learning organizations. Mm-hmm. And Peter Senge, who coined this, I think 30 years ago. And I mean, this is a concept that has evolved quite a lot, but is more relevant now than ever before.
I'd agree totally. I mean, you know, that book he wrote, the Fifth Discipline, he wrote it in a time 30 years ago, as you say, when it was a completely different world. It was a world which was largely steady state, where we could predict what was going to happen next, where companies worked in their existing markets and their nations, and everything was kind of pretty stable. And nothing is like that anymore. So, we live in this world of, hyper complexity as well as speed. So I think that's kind of the two big things, which we often call uncertainty, but it's actually just because we haven't got the energy or capability to cope with making sense of it all necessarily. But also kind of globalization and kind of a huge number of kind of startups and entrepreneurial companies trying to disrupt every kind of legacy company, a new generation of consumers and employees, the Generation Z. And, all of those things together mean that we really have to kind of learn in a very different way. And I think, learning organizations today are more important than ever, because learning gives you advantage. And Peter said that in his book originally. Learning is the source of competitive advantage, but nothing is further from the truth now. How can you learn faster and better than your competition? Allows you to keep a step ahead, allows you to make sense first of what's happening in your world, allows you to interpret how to use these new technologies quicker, allows you to serve new types of customers and understand their emerging needs before the people do. And so the ability to have systems and loops for learning by which we learn either through technology or through humanity, but also kind of respond to that learning at the same time. The idea of learning organization is not just to learn, it's to do something with the learning, to transform, to act on it. And so learn and doing, those kind of, that kind of loop has become more important at hyperspeed and in a relentless way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the learning loops are shorter, absolutely critical to learn and apply, if you will, and constantly test. Now, another point that you raised, which I think is also really fascinating, is how we operate in a world where machine learning is playing a big role in what we can what we can learn and how we can evolve our businesses. But at the same time, you have still a lot of critical impact from the humanistic learning. So how do you see human and machine learning in harmony and operating in a learning organization?
I think that's a really interesting question. So, there's lots of books on human and technology and how they kind of work together. And there's things which humans can do in this kind of changing world, which are unique and which kind of allow us to differentiate. We can be empathetic, intuitive, more creative. And that will allow organizations to stand out and to rise above the machines, if you like. And there's things machines can do. They can take away routine processes and they can make you more efficient and faster. The really interesting bit is where you connect machines and people together. And almost how machines can help people and how people can help machines. But machines helping people, in a sense, it's like becoming superhuman. The ability to use a machine to be able to make a smarter, faster decision, where you've got a huge complexity of variables and amounts of data and things to weigh up, and being able to use that analysis to help make better decisions and to make organizational decisions when you're running a global organization, that kind of stuff, is really quite interesting. At the same time, it's all about how you can sense what's happening in the marketplace much faster. So what customers want, and so being able to get fast feedback loops there, being able to understand what the new technologies are, being able to work with partners in much broader ecosystems rather than trying to do everything yourself. One of the most interesting organizations I look at is Alibaba, and Ming Zhen, who is their CSO, Chief Strategy Officer. He has an approach to developing strategy called the self-tuning strategy, or more generally, the self-tuning organization. And the idea there is that they actually adapt their strategy every day, not every year or every 3 months, but every day in response to how their incredibly dynamic markets are changing. And so being able to kind of use data and then be able to use intuition at the same time, either to make decisions or to keep pace with this changing world, I think is phenomenally interesting. And at the heart of it is how you can apply technology, but also be human at the same time, as you rightly say.
I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. I think, adapting your strategy on a daily basis, that is scary, but definitely, I mean, something with, this what we can all relate to is just, managing in the now and tuning into to the influences that we're getting. So yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think another question that I really that I find really interesting is around the personalization. Now with technology and machine learning, we can do what we have been talking about for the better part of the last 30 years, which is creating a fully adaptive, personalized experience. And that is something that is incredibly powerful in facing the challenges that we have, the big challenges of upskilling organizations, reskilling organizations, and letting individuals and teams also learning in a more autonomous way and in a more organic way. Now, how do you see that, Peter?
Well, I guess I would start off by saying, one of the best business books I've read of the last couple of years is a book by a French guy called Frédéric Laloux, Reinventing Organizations. And in that book, he really talks about how organizations have evolved over time, and we've become more customer centric, and we've moved away from that kind of controlling hierarchy to be much more empowered and collaborative. But he takes it a step further, and he really talks about these self-organizing teams who are guided by a sense of purpose, but they work within a framework, and they're incredibly entrepreneurial and individual. And I think that's really one of the interesting clues to all of this. So how you can see teams themselves is the major unit of learning. And you see organizations, for example, like Supercell, the gaming company from Finland. Ilkka Paananen, the CEO there, he says, "I'm the least powerful CEO in the world." And why is that? Well, it's because all of the information, all of the learning is with his individual teams. And he has small teams of people working on different customer segments, different games, different ideas. And they're the people who understand their audiences best. They're the people who understand the technology best. They're the people who understand, therefore, the business best. And Ilkka Paananen is much more of a supporter, a facilitator, an enabler. You take a company like Haier, the huge Chinese company, which is the largest in terms of refrigerators and white goods. And Zhang Rumin at that company there, he's actually created 10,000 micro businesses, never more than 100 people. And the idea there is that they're incredibly close to their customer. They're incredibly entrepreneurial because they all act like startups, but they act within the kind of the framework of a large organization at the same time. So they get the benefits of the shared resources and the investments and the distribution, but also they have the freedom and the flexibility and the creativity which you typically get in a startup. And I think that is a way in which you get this kind of individualized and much more collaborative learning approach, so much more focused, but you also get the benefits of big company at the same time.
Well, that's impressive. I mean, I think that absolutely a clear trend, and successfully so, is moving to more autonomy and driving learning in the teams and letting that really drive the business forward. And I think that's also very much, the whole concept of, moving to more of learning in the flow of work also, the loop of learning, application, et cetera, is incredibly powerful in that context and can move faster. I think another ingredient really is a learning mindset. And that's something that I think is crucial. It needs to be role modeled and embodied at the top level of the organization, but it needs to be lived across the whole organization. And crucial for this is, really building a safe environment for testing and learning. And one of the organizations that I find a great case of where they have really taken a growth mindset and then a learning mindset is Microsoft, and what Satya Nadella has done ever since he took over.
I mean, you mentioned Microsoft. I was working there most of last year, and I got the chance to interview Satya and for my latest book. And I asked him, since he took over as CEO, what has he done? What has he changed about Microsoft? Because it's really come back from a really uncertain period. And he said there was two things. And those two things are firstly mindset, as you talked about. So he's created a growth mindset, which we all know about. We've all read Carol Dweck's book. And that's really about saying, well, there can be a fixed mindset where you're actually, you're wedded to an existing way of working, which you've always worked in the past, but you're going to kind of essentially keep going with all the time. You just kind of try to make it a bit better. Or there's a growth mindset, which is where in today's world of dynamic change, you experiment, you try new things, and probably you're going to fail. But actually, that's good, because failure is one of the best way of learning. And so being able to kind of constantly experiment, constantly learn, constantly try new things is the best way to move forwards. The challenge, of course, is that could almost become like anarchy unless you kind of create a structure in which it happens. And the simple structure he created is to give the organization a clarity of purpose at the same time. So they all know what they're trying to do, which is to empower businesses and individuals to achieve more is through their products and services. And so this purpose gives them a lens, a frame in which this empowered anarchy can then happen, but also thrive.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think, again, the point of, that shared sense of clarity and purpose is just so critical in driving, putting structure to it. Well, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
We've covered a lot of ground in this conversation around the key attributes of learning organizations and how important learning is in the future. And I think, Peter, as you rounded up the point around, empowering individuals, empowering the teams to try, to fail, to learn and iterate continuously is a key element. A shared sense of purpose, but also a continuous loop, a learning loop that, of course, is increasing in speed, but that is absolutely crucial. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us for the conversation today and sharing your perspectives and insights.
Thank you, Gustaf. It's great to be part of it. And I wish you every luck, everybody, in terms of seizing this moment of incredible change, but incredible moment when we can learn both by looking backwards, but also even more by looking forwards. So enjoy the journey ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. It's we live in a very interesting and exciting period, an inflection point for learning, I feel, and big opportunities to solve the big problems that we have. So thank you all for tuning in. We have a couple more panels coming up. The next one is going to be exploring the potential of the experience and creating experiential in a virtual context. Teresa Martin de Tortillo will be moderating that session. Teresa is the chair of IE Exponential Learning. So thank you very much. And over to you, Teresa.